The story begins with a man named George waking up next to his girlfriend, Sarah, on July 1st. It's a big day for George because he's ready to pitch his new app to the bank manager. While heading to the bank, he hears news about a dangerous virus outbreak called MERS-22. Later, he meets the bank manager, who is really impressed with his app and approves a loan. In the evening, George and Sarah go out to celebrate this new success. Later, at home, Sarah reveals that she is pregnant, which makes George very happy. A few days later, the couple ties the knot and is very excited to welcome the new chapter of their lives. 6 months later, we see the news that reveals that daily infections of MERS-22 are escalating at an alarming rate. One night, Sarah feels very sick, so George takes her to the hospital. The place is crowded with patients, and the couple waits for their turn in line. Seeing this miserable situation, Sarah asks George if they're going to die. But before George can answer, he feels very strange and begins to see things that happened in the past 6 months. Suddenly, George wakes up in his home beside Sarah, who informs him that today is a very big day for him. He then checks the date, and to his disbelief, it is July 1st. After that, he heads for the bank, and on the way, he once again hears news about the potential virus outbreak. Later, he meets the bank manager and tries to tell him that they've previously met, and that he gave him the loan. However, the manager claims that he has never met him before. That evening, when George returns home, Sarah asks him what happened at the bank. He says it went really badly, and he didn't get the loan. However, he is not worried about that and tells her that they have been through all of this before. He explains how she'll become pregnant, they'll get married, and a virus will cause widespread deaths. However, Sarah thinks he has gone nuts and advises him to consult with a doctor. In the next few months, George tries to find answers and prepares for the upcoming outbreak. But Sarah gets fed up with his weird behavior and eventually decides to leave him. George tries to stop her, but a mysterious woman named Archie approaches him. She tells him to let Sarah go because it's not going to work out. She claims to have solutions to his problems and advises him to go straight to an address if the time loop happens again. 3 months later, George is wandering around during Christmas time when he notices Sarah and her co-worker, Carl, at a bar. However, he doesn't want to bother her, so he goes home and sleeps. The next day, George wakes up on July 1st again and finds Sarah beside him. He becomes emotional to see her and kisses her. Sarah then reminds him of his meeting with the bank manager, but he goes straight to the address Archie gave him, where she is waiting for him. After they meet, Archie tells George that she is a member of the organization called the Lazarus Project, and they are dedicated to preventing or undoing mass extinction events. She explains that the world has ended so many times, but they've undone it each time using time travel. She informs him that he is a mutant who has gone through 20 time jumps, but he only remembers the past 2. Following this, Archie takes him to the Lazarus Project headquarters, where he meets the rest of the team. The team leader is a woman named Wes, and the only other mutant is a guy named Shiv. They tell him that they can only go back to July 1st since it works as a checkpoint. Later, George overhears the team discussing finding a vaccine for the new virus, implying that MERS-22 has been successfully avoided. After this, George becomes part of the Lazarus Project to save the world. His first assignment is to find a man named Denis Rebrov, who is a former Lazarus Project member. It turns out that he has hijacked a nuclear warhead and is planning to detonate it soon, so the Lazarus Project is working to prevent this. As part of this big plan, George travels to Paris with his team to track down Rebrov. George stays in the communication car while Archie leads the team into the building where Rebrov is staying. Unfortunately, Rebrov soon ends up killing Archie and her team. He then escapes on his motorcycle, and while George chases him, things escalate, and many innocent people are injured. Soon after, Rebrov sets off the nuclear bomb, and everyone around, including the chasing police officers and Rebrov, meets their end. In the following scene, George wakes up on July 1st, implying that Lazarus has reset time again. Archie calls him early in the morning, saying she can't believe she was dead. Later, as George is walking Sarah to her workplace, he receives a call from Archie, who tells him that they've tracked down Rebrov's location. While George is on the phone, an angry Carl confronts Sarah. He argues with her because George gave him lousy financial advice on purpose, and he lost a lot of money. She tries to calm him down, but he accidentally pushes her off the sidewalk, and she gets hit by a truck. In the following scene, we see a flashback to summer 2018 in Russia, where Archie is with her coworker and lover, Ross. They're sitting on a roof watching a missile strike, which they were unable to stop. Archie rests on Ross's shoulder, and they witness the world seemingly coming to an end. In the present, we see a distraught George, who rushes injured Sarah to the hospital. In the meantime, Archie and her team watch as Rebrov is captured by special forces. Later, Archie learns about Sarah and heads to the hospital to comfort George. The doctor informs him that Sarah has survived emergency surgery, but is still unconscious. Following this, George returns home, along with Archie. They share a drink, and George starts talking about going back in time to save Sarah. However, Archie tells him that they cannot do this unless some disaster threatens humanity's existence in the world. Since they've captured Rebrov now, resetting time would undo their success. George then talks about when he met Sarah in the summer of 2018. Archie mentions that during that time, she was on a mission that didn't go well, and they had to reset the clock many times. After this, we go back to the summer of 2018, when Archie and Ross are trying to stop the Third World War. They meet with a general to talk about missile strikes on his country by an enemy. At the same time, in 2018, George is supposed to meet Sarah. He's at a house party, and his friend tells him about a girl named Sarah who will be a perfect match for him. Since George doesn't know her, he starts looking for her. While doing so, he talks to various women, not noticing Sarah passing by many times. During this time, Archie and Ross try everything they can to prevent the war, but they always fail, and are forced to go back in time to save the world. Every time they reset the time to the last checkpoint, George and Sarah's meeting also changes. Sometimes they don't meet each other, and at other times they talk for a while. But just as things are about to move forward, time resets again. In the present, Shiv arrives to meet George, and he offers to take him to Carl's home and take revenge. George agrees, but when they get there, he realizes that this won't change anything. He refuses to beat up Carl and says he wants to return to the checkpoint to avoid her accident. After this, Shiv and George go to see Rebrov, who is confined at Lazarus headquarters. Rebrov identifies George from the Paris incident and says he did a lousy job. Following this, he begins to complain about the Lazarus Project, stating that they torture people for information. He also doesn't see the point of the organization or its mission. He claims that the world should have ended thousands of times, but Lazarus interferes with these natural events. Hearing this, Shiv becomes irritated and walks away, with George following behind. Returning to a flashback from 2018, Archie and Ross are on a mission when she gets shot and dies. Despite this, she wakes up next to her husband at the July 1st checkpoint. She calls Ross and discovers that time has reset again, so she's still alive. They then talk about moving forward with their relationship and breaking up with their partners. After hanging up, Archie returns to her room and confesses to her husband that she no longer loves him. Later, when Archie and Ross meet, he discloses to her that the day she died, the general they are trying to kill also died accidentally, thus stopping the nuclear attack. This means the war was over, but Ross had to reset time to save her. Hearing this, Archie becomes enraged at him for putting her ahead of their job. However, Ross kisses her and promises her that he won't let anything bad happen to her. Days later, the couple meets outside a restaurant, and Ross enters with a hidden bomb to kill the general inside. He tries to plant the bomb but is quickly caught and shot. He then collapses to the ground and detonates the bomb, killing everyone, including himself. Meanwhile, Archie witnesses this from the outside and is devastated. Following this incident, Archie calls Wes and begs her to reset the time so Ross can be saved. Wes expresses her sympathy, but she explains she can't do this because their mission is finally successful. Archie cries in pain, and Rebrov, who works with her, hears this from a distance. That night, George meets Sarah again outside the party, and they hit it off quickly. In the present, George finds out that Sarah is dead, and he breaks down alongside her dead body. Afterward, he goes alone to Rebrov's cell and begs him to take them back to the July 1st checkpoint. He insists that he and Sarah made it through the various time loops in 2018 to end up together. When Rebrov asks if he is ready to risk everything to bring Sarah back, George says yes. The scene shifts back to November 2017, and we see a Lazarus employee named Janet. She is in a bathroom stall, taking a pregnancy test, which turns out to be positive. She then exits the bathroom and calls Rebrov, who is her partner. She informs him of her pregnancy, and they are both overjoyed. But when Janet tells Archie about it, she becomes worried because Lazarus agents are advised to conceive between January and June. If they give birth before July, there's a risk of losing the baby if the organization has to reset the timeline. In the present, Wes announces that a group called the Lost Glory is now in possession of the nuclear bomb, and they've found their hideout in Prague. Hearing this, George immediately wants to be part of the mission. However, Archie refuses to let him join because he is still grieving for the loss of Sarah. Later, George returns to see Rebrov and informs him of the updates. Rebrov tells him he can alert the group on their YouTube page and says that the most important thing is the detonator. He then gives George an address in Barcelona and a secret code to use when meeting the person with the detonator. Following this, George sends an anonymous message to the Lost Glory group, alerting them that their location has been found. After that, he travels to Barcelona and arrives at the address given to him by Rebrov. There, he comes across Janet, who holds him at gunpoint. However, when George says the secret code told by Rebrov, she finally puts down the gun. She then goes to the kitchen, where we see a little girl by her side. After this, Janet asks George to stay for dinner. The scene then shifts back to 2017, and we see Rebrov taking Janet to the doctor for a checkup. The doctor assures them that their baby is completely healthy. After this, the couple returns to the Lazarus Project headquarters, where everyone is watching Shiv carry out an operation. Moments later, Shiv successfully takes out the target, and they all are happy. In the following scene, Janet gives birth to a baby boy 2 weeks before the July checkpoint. While she's sleeping, Shiv arrives and tells Rebrov that he mistakenly eliminated the wrong target since their enemy had set up a ruse. Frustrated, Rebrov tells Shiv to find the correct target and fix the situation to avoid a timeline reset. With 2 days until the checkpoint, Janet and Rebrov are anxious when they hear about a missing nuclear weapon. Soon after, they get the news of a detonation in China, which throws the entire world into chaos. So, Wes orders that they return to time because war has broken out. This will undo what happened, which means that Janet's baby will no longer exist. To save her baby, Janet cries and begs Wes, but to no avail, and they eventually end up resetting the time. In the present, Archie and her team reach Prague to raid the Lost Glory's hideout. Shiv finds it odd that George is so eager to get back to work, but Archie assures him that there's nothing to be worried about, and George just wants to be useful. Soon, the team breaks into the hideout, only to find it empty. They suspect someone must have warned the Lost Glory about their arrival. Meanwhile, George opens up to Janet about the pain of losing his unborn baby when Sarah was pregnant. Janet then shares how their lives unfolded after the loss of their son. In a flashback, we see Rebrov and Janet trying to have another child after the incident. Eventually, Janet becomes pregnant again and gives birth to a new baby girl. Despite the previous tragedy, the couple seems happy with their daughter. Unfortunately, in 2018, Lazarus resets the timeline multiple times due to Ross and Archie's unsuccessful attempts to stop a nuclear attack. This means that Janet has to give birth to her daughter each time the time machine is used. As time goes on, the constant pain and exhaustion of giving birth weigh heavily on Janet, causing deep depression. At one point, she even deliberately crashes into an oncoming truck with her baby before a time loop resets. Later, she realizes that her daughter is also a mutant, and she remembers the pain of being born again and again. Finally, Lazarus successfully prevents the crisis when Ross kills the general along with himself. However, Rebrov can't take this anymore, so he angrily confronts Wes. He pulls a gun on her and insists that she take him to the time machine so he can destroy it. Rebrov feels that the world wants to die and that people should stop interfering with it. He then kills 2 agents, but before he can kill Wes, Shiv arrives and stops him. However, Rebrov escapes before they can catch him, and he immediately informs Janet to run away too. Returning to the present, George wakes up on the couch in the morning to discover the apartment empty. Janet and her daughter are gone, but she left a box for him. Along with it is a note from Janet, in which she hopes George will be reunited with Sarah soon. Upon returning to the UK, George quickly opens the box and discovers the detonator inside.